A cold night, a police officer on the brink of death and a mysterious figure emerging from the shadows. After being shot during an operation, Rafael Lima wakes up in a hospital, but something is not right. A girl with enigmatic eyes appears by his side, claiming to be his only chance of survival. But who is she really? What is happening to the hospital where he is? With each passing moment, the truth is revealed, and Rafael begins to realize that his life was not saved by chance. The story of a simple mission turns into a dark plot of ancient rituals, deadly secrets, and a fight against forces much more powerful than he could have imagined. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any exciting stories like this one. Here, each video is a journey of overcoming an emotion that you won't want to miss. It was a cold Tuesday night when the sound of sirens echoed down the street. Officer Rafael Lima had been shot in the chest during a high-risk operation. Unconscious and in critical condition, he was rushed to the hospital. The bullet had hit its mark, but it wasn't fatal, at least, that's what the doctors believed. That night, Rafael fought for his life as the hospital prepared to do everything in their power to keep him alive. He was in an induced coma, surrounded by tubes and monitors. His body was still, but his mind was somewhere else. He wasn't sure if it was a dream or a delirium. But in his mind, he was back on that street, the same spot where the shot had found him. He could feel the cold pavement against his cheek, the pain in his chest, and the metallic taste of blood. He was alone, but not for long. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. It was a girl, about 12 years old, with long, dark hair, simple clothes, and eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of a distant street lamp. She stood there, looking at him with a calm, almost serene expression as Rafael, weak and confused, tried to figure out if she was real or just part of his fading consciousness. "You can't leave yet," she said, her voice soft yet firm. Rafael tried to speak, to ask who she was, how she had gotten there, but nothing came out. His mouth wouldn't move, and the pain in his chest made it hard to concentrate. The girl crouched down beside him, gently placing her hand on his. It was as if a strange, warm energy flowed through his body, a sense of comfort and reassurance. Somehow, he no longer felt as if he was alone. It was as though death, so close just moments ago, had paused, unsure of what to do next. "I'm here to help you," the girl continued, her smile calm. "You can fight, if you want to. I'll give you a reason to live." With those words, she stood and began to walk away. Rafael tried to rise, wanting to follow her, but his body wouldn't respond. The world around him seemed to twist, as though he were caught between the living and the dead. And then, a scream. Not one of pain, but a cry of warning. Rafael wasn't sure if it came from his own mind or if someone was actually calling to him, but it felt important. It was then that the girl's figure faded into the shadows, and the sound of the scream grew louder, closer. Rafael could still hear the scream, echoing in his mind. It wasn't just a noise, it was a call, urgent and desperate, like someone was trying to reach him from a distance. He tried to focus on it, to move toward it, but his body remained unresponsive, as though it had abandoned him. He was trapped in the in-between, stuck between life and death, lost in a fog that felt colder than the night air had been when he was shot. The streets, the hospital, everything blurred together. His chest ached, not just from the bullet wound, but from the weight of something he couldn't fully understand. The girl's face appeared again, clearer now. She was standing at the edge of a dark alley, her eyes focused on him, waiting. But this time, there was something different about her, something less serene, more urgent, almost pleading. "Come on, you have to wake up," she said, her voice shaking slightly, like she wasn't entirely sure she could make him respond. Rafael's heart rate spiked. It felt as though she was speaking directly to him, cutting through the fog in his mind. His eyelids fluttered. The sound of machines, the beeping, the sharp scent of antiseptic, it all began to pull him back. He wasn't sure how, but somehow, he was starting to feel his body again. "Don't leave me," the girl whispered. Her voice, once calm, now carried an edge of desperation. Raphael's fingers twitched. The alley where she stood shifted, almost as if it were a doorway, a portal between the world he knew and whatever lay beyond. She was the key, he realized. The one thing that might pull him back from the edge. "Please," she urged. "I need you." Raphael's breath hitched, and for the first time since the gunshot, he could feel something. A pulse, a warmth, a connection. His mind, once clouded and disoriented, was starting to clear. And with that clarity came an overwhelming sense of determination. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The fog in his lungs made it difficult to even breathe. Still, he managed to move his head, his gaze locked on the girl. His fingers twitched again, this time more deliberately. She seemed to sense it. Her eyes widened, and a glimmer of hope flashed across her face. "That's it," she said softly. "You're still here. I knew you wouldn't give up." Her hand reached out toward him, and in that moment, everything around them seemed to fade. The distant sounds of the hospital, the flashing lights, the pain, it all seemed to dissolve into nothing. It was just him and her, in this strange place between life and death, a place where nothing made sense but everything felt real. "Hold on," she whispered. "I'm going to give you the strength you need. But you have to fight with me." Raphael didn't know if it was the pain, the confusion, or something else entirely, but he suddenly felt a pull, a strange, unexplainable force moving through him. The girl's hand, now firmly on his, seemed to be drawing something out of him, something he didn't know he had left. A strength he hadn't realized was still there. The darkness around him began to shift, and the world of the hospital seemed to blur even further. For the first time since the shot, Raphael wasn't alone. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. The girl had given him a reason to live, a tether that might bring him back to the world he knew. And just like that, the scream stopped. Everything went silent. Raphael's eyes snapped open. Raphael's eyes fluttered open. The world around him was a blur of bright lights and sterile white walls. He felt the cold surface beneath him, metal, hard, unyielding. His chest ached, but not as intensely as before. Slowly, as if his body were learning to function again, he took in a deep breath. It burned. But it was a breath, and it felt like the first one he'd taken in ages. For a moment, he was disoriented, unsure of where he was. The sounds of machines around him, the beeping, the whirring, the occasional hiss of oxygen, were faint, as if coming from a distance. But it didn't matter. He was awake. He was alive. His fingers twitched. He could move them. His hands, although stiff and trembling, seemed to obey him. And then he remembered the girl. Panic surged through him. Where was she? What had happened? Had it all been a dream? A hallucination from his injured mind? But there was no time to dwell on that. A sharp pain in his side reminded him that he wasn't out of danger yet. Raphael tried to sit up, but his body protested, weakness seizing him like an iron grip. The lights above him flickered, and for a brief second, everything around him seemed to warp. "Stay still," a voice said, low and steady. "You're in a hospital. You've been shot." Raphael turned his head slowly, the movement feeling foreign to him. A nurse stood by his side, a concerned expression on her face. She adjusted the drip, checking the monitors attached to him. "You're lucky to be alive, Officer Lima," she said, her tone professional but soft. "We almost lost you." He opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was dry. He could barely croak out a word. "Water," he rasped, his voice barely audible. The nurse nodded and quickly handed him a cup of water. He drank greedily, the cold liquid soothing his parched throat. But even as he drank, his mind kept drifting back to the girl. Was she real? Had she been a figment of his delirium? As he set the cup down, a new thought struck him. How did she know I needed help? He had no answers. He didn't even remember how the shooting had happened, how he ended up in the hospital. Everything was a blur. His last clear memory was of the operation, but the moments after that were lost in a haze of pain and confusion. "Who found me?" he asked, his voice a little stronger now. The nurse glanced at him curiously. "Your partner, Officer Morales. He's been here almost non-stop. He was with you when they brought you in." Morales. Raphael's mind tried to summon an image of his partner, but it was like trying to grab at smoke. Nothing stuck. "Is he here?" Raphael asked, looking around the room. The nurse shook her head. "He stepped out for a moment. But he'll be back soon. Just rest for now." Raphael nodded slowly, still unsure of what to make of the situation. His head was foggy, but one thing was certain: he couldn't ignore the feeling that someone, had pulled him back from the edge. That girl, whoever she was, had given him something that no one else could. A reason to fight. A reason to wake up. As if on cue, the door to his room opened. Raphael turned his head to see his partner, Detective Morales, walking in. The older man looked worn, dark circles under his eyes, a stubble on his face, but there was a light of relief in his gaze when he saw that Raphael was awake. "Lima," Morales said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and joy. "I thought you weren't going to make it." Raphael tried to smile, but it felt strange. His body wasn't cooperating fully, and his face felt stiff from the sedatives. Instead, he just nodded, still taking in the reality of the situation. Where did you find me?" Raphael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Morales gave him a puzzled look. "What do you mean?" "We got to you right after the shooting. You were lying in the street, bleeding out. We almost lost you before the ambulance even got here." Raphael frowned, something gnawing at the back of his mind. He wasn't sure why, but the memory of the girl tugged at him. She had been there, hadn't she? Hadn't she saved him? "You sure that's how it happened?" Raphael asked, struggling to sit up. Morales furrowed his brow, clearly concerned by the question. "Lima, what the hell are you talking about? We had to get you to the hospital fast. You were shot in the chest. I don't remember anyone else being around." Raphael's heart skipped a beat. No one else? He had clearly seen her, he could still feel her touch, the warmth of her hand on his, the words she had whispered. But no one had seen her? Was she real? Had she truly been there, or was it all just a hallucination? Before he could say anything more, the nurse stepped forward again, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "You need to rest, Officer Lima," she said firmly, but kindly. "You've been through a lot." Raphael didn't argue. He let his head sink back into the pillow, still lost in his thoughts, still unsure of what was real and what wasn't. The girl, the warmth he felt, the mysterious connection they had shared, nothing made sense, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside him. Something deeper than just the injury. And then, as the lights flickered above him once again, he thought he heard something, faint, like a whisper in the wind. "Don't forget me." Raphael couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He lay there, his eyes drifting between the sterile white walls and the fading daylight outside the hospital window. His chest still throbbed with pain, but it wasn't the physical ache that disturbed him most. It was the nagging sense of unfinished business, of something important that he had missed. He thought about the girl. Her face, her voice, the way she had reached out to him. It felt real, too real to be just a dream or a hallucination. But Morales had insisted that no one had been there, that he had been alone on the street. No one else had seen her. So why couldn't Raphael shake the memory of her? The feeling that she was somehow still watching over him, even now? His mind was running in circles when Morales re-entered the room. The older detective looked a little better than before. He'd cleaned himself up, but the exhaustion still lingered in his eyes. "You okay, Lima?" Morales asked, his voice laced with concern. "You've been out for a while, but you're looking more like yourself." Raphael nodded, but the unease in his gut wouldn't go away. He couldn't ignore it any longer. He needed answers. "Morales," he began cautiously, his voice hoarse, "there was a girl. When I was out, when I was between life and death, I saw her. A young girl, probably 12, dark hair. She was there with me." Morales blinked, clearly taken aback. "A girl? What are you talking about?" "I'm serious," Raphael said, his voice more urgent now. "She was real, Morales. She was by my side. She helped me. She said she was there to help me fight, to give me a reason to stay." The detective stared at him for a moment, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Lima, I don't know what you saw, but you were out cold for hours. You were on the edge. I'm not sure if what you're describing was some kind of hallucination, or something else, but I can tell you no one else was there. No girl, nothing." Raphael's stomach twisted. He felt the tightness in his chest again, the same kind of feeling he'd had just before he'd woken up. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Could it have been a hallucination? But it didn't feel like one. It felt like she was there to save him. Just then, the nurse returned with a fresh cup of water. She offered a soft smile, her eyes flickering toward the door where Morales was standing. "Everything all right in here?" Morales gave her a brief nod, though he still looked unsettled by Raphael's insistence about the girl. He glanced back at his partner. "You should rest, Lima." Raphael opened his mouth to speak again, but before he could, something caught his attention. A figure standing by the window. It was faint at first, like a shadow in the corner of his eye. But then he turned his head. There she was. The girl. Her presence seemed to make the room feel colder, her figure standing just out of the reach of the hospital lights, half hidden by the blinds. She was wearing the same clothes he remembered, a simple, faded dress. Her long dark hair framed her pale face, and her large eyes locked onto his with a kind of quiet urgency. Raphael's breath caught in his throat. She was real, or at least she was here now, in front of him. He couldn't explain it, but there she was. "Lima?" Morales asked, his voice breaking through Raphael's stunned silence. "What the hell's going on?" Raphael blinked, his heart racing. But when he looked back at the window, she was gone. Just like that. Vanished. What the hell was that? Morales demanded, stepping closer to Raphael's bed. "What's happening to you?" "I saw her," Raphael whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. "She was standing by the window." "I saw her, Morales." The detective's face went pale. "Who?" "The girl," Raphael said, his voice shaking now. "The one who was with me when I was out. She's real. She's here." Morales stepped back, rubbing his face as if trying to make sense of what Raphael was saying. "I don't know what's going on, Lima, but you need to calm down. You've been through a lot, Anne." "No," Raphael interrupted, his voice more forceful now. "I'm telling you, Morales, she's not just in my head. She was here. I saw her, just now. She's real." The room fell silent. The nurse looked between the two men, her face etched with concern but also confusion. She hadn't seen anything, but Raphael was insistent. Something in his eyes told her that he wasn't lying. Whatever he had seen, he believed it. Just then, a cold draft swept through the room, despite the sealed windows. The lights flickered again, this time more violently, casting eerie shadows along the walls. It was brief, but long enough to make everyone pause. Raphael's heart thudded in his chest. Something wasn't right. The girl had appeared again. The draft, the flickering lights, it was as if she were trying to communicate with him. "I need to know who she is," Raphael muttered, his voice desperate. "I need answers." Morales opened his mouth to speak but was cut off by the nurse. "I'll get the doctor," she said, her tone firm but gentle. "We need to make sure you're not overexerting yourself. This could be a side effect of the medication. Please, just rest." But Raphael was beyond the point of rest. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The girl was real. And whatever had happened to him during those critical moments, it wasn't over. Something had changed. The girl had given him something, a purpose to survive. But now, he needed to know what it meant. And why she had appeared again. Raphael couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. His mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments of what he had experienced, the strange moments that didn't seem to fit into the reality he knew. The girl. The touch. The words. They were all so vivid, yet everyone around him, Morales, the nurse, the doctors, seemed to brush it off as either a dream or the effects of his injuries. But he couldn't ignore it. Not now. He glanced toward the door, half expecting the girl to appear again, but nothing happened. The room remained still, the usual hum of hospital life continuing in the background, beeping machines, muffled voices from the hallway, the shuffle of shoes on the tile floor. It all felt normal. But Raphael knew better. Something had shifted. Morales, standing at the foot of his bed, looked at him like he was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Lima," he said, his voice softer now, but with a note of concern. "I don't know what you're going through right now, but I need you to focus. You've been through a lot. The trauma, the meds, hell, even the bullet to your chest. You're just recovering. Just rest and let the doctors take care of you. We'll figure this out." Raphael shook his head slowly, ignoring the sharp pain that ran through his chest as he did so. "You don't get it, Morales," he said, his voice low and tight. "I saw her. I wasn't hallucinating. She was right here, standing by the window. You didn't see her, but I did. And I can't shake the feeling that she's trying to tell me something." Morales didn't reply right away. He just stood there, his arms crossed, staring at Raphael as if trying to read him, trying to figure out whether he was losing his mind or if something deeper was going on. After a moment, he spoke again, more cautiously. "Maybe we should talk to the doctor. You might be seeing things because of the stress. Or the drugs they've been giving you." "No," Raphael insisted, his voice sharp. "You don't understand. She told me she was here to help me. She said I could fight. She said she would give me a reason to live." He paused, searching his memory for the exact words. "She said I had to fight, but for what? What does it all mean?" Before Morales could respond, the door to the room opened, and a young doctor stepped inside, his white coat flapping as he entered. Dr. Fernandez had been overseeing Raphael's recovery, and though he looked tired, there was a professionalism in his demeanor that immediately set Raphael on edge. "How are we feeling today, Officer Lima?" the doctor asked, looking at the monitors as he moved toward the bed. "Still here," Raphael muttered, his eyes darting between Morales and the doctor. "But there's something I need to ask you. I need to know what's going on. Why did I see that girl? Why is she haunting me?" Dr. Fernandez gave him a long look, as though considering whether to answer. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice measured. "We've already talked about this, Raphael. You've been through severe trauma. The bullet wound, the shock to your system, the blood loss. It can cause hallucinations. Some people see things. It's not unusual, especially under stress. Raphael clenched his fists, ignoring the pain. It wasn't a hallucination, he snapped. I wasn't imagining it. She was real. I saw her, Dr. Fernandez. She was here, in this room. She spoke to me. She's real. The doctor raised an eyebrow. And what did she say to you, exactly? She said I couldn't leave, Raphael said, his voice cracking slightly. She said I had to fight. That she would give me a reason to live. But I don't understand. Who is she? Why is she helping me? Dr. Fernandez looked at him for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, then he turned to Morales, who was watching this exchange quietly, unsure of what to make of it all. Raphael, you need to rest, Dr. Fernandez said gently. It's possible that you're experiencing something called post-traumatic stress. It's not uncommon for people who go through near-death experiences to see visions. Sometimes, your mind creates these figures as a coping mechanism. But Raphael wasn't listening anymore. His gaze was locked on something beyond the doctor. The window. The air in the room had shifted. A cold breeze had begun to flow from the crack in the blinds. It wasn't a draft from the ventilation, this was something different. Something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He didn't have to turn to see if the girl was there. He knew she was. The air felt charged, electric, as if she were standing just behind him, waiting for him to turn around. Raphael? Morales asked, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Raphael slowly turned his head. There, standing just on the other side of the window, was the girl. She was looking straight at him, her eyes wide and pleading, as if trying to communicate something important. But this time, there was something different in her expression. It wasn't just urgency, it was a warning. Her lips moved, but no sound reached him. It was a warning. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed open. The nurse, a look of panic on her face, rushed in, her eyes scanning the room quickly. What's going on? She demanded. The lights, the draft, it's getting colder in here. Raphael blinked, his gaze snapping back to the window, but the girl was gone. She had vanished, just as quickly as she had appeared. Raphael? Morales asked again, his tone sharp this time. What did you see? What the hell is going on? The room felt oppressive now, the walls closing in on him. The temperature seemed to drop by several degrees, and the weight of the air was suffocating. Raphael swallowed hard. He didn't know how to explain what had just happened. How could he? How could anyone believe him? There's something wrong, Morales, he said hoarsely. I don't know what's going on, but it's not just in my head. There's something here, and I need to find out what it is. Before it's too late. The air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating. Raphael could still feel the cold that had crept in when the girl appeared by the window. His skin was prickling, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew, without a doubt, that something far more dangerous than a mere hallucination was at play. The girl, her warning, the way she had appeared and vanished, it couldn't just be his mind playing tricks. She was trying to tell him something. Raphael, are you listening to me? Morales's voice broke through the fog in his mind. The detective's face was tight with concern, but Raphael wasn't sure if it was worry for his partner or confusion at the strange events that had unfolded in the room. I don't know what's going on, Morales, Raphael said, his voice rough. He forced himself to sit up, though the pain in his chest flared with every small movement. His muscles felt weak, his mind still struggling to piece together the fragments of the last few hours. Something's wrong. I'm telling you, she's real. And whatever it is that's happening, it's bigger than just me. Morales crossed his arms and shook his head, clearly at a loss. You're talking about a ghost, Lima. I don't know how much longer I can just stand here and pretend like. Stop, Raphael cut him off, his eyes sharp. It's not a ghost. This isn't just some random vision from my head. She's trying to warn me, Morales. Warn us. Before Morales could respond, the nurse stepped forward, her face pale and tense. There's been a shift in your vitals, she said, her voice almost strained. We need to keep you stable, Officer Lima. I'm going to get the doctor again. Raphael nodded, but his focus had shifted. His eyes were glued to the window once more, half expecting the girl to reappear. His stomach churned with a mix of dread and something else, urgency, maybe. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a sense of impending danger. He could almost hear the clock ticking down, each moment that passed, each beat of his heart, taking him closer to something he wasn't sure he was ready for. The nurse stepped out of the room, and Morales, still unsure of what to make of everything, took a seat near the bed. The tension was palpable, and Raphael couldn't stand the silence. You have to listen to me, Morales, Raphael said, his voice quieter now. The girl, she's not just some figment. She has to be connected to the shooting somehow. She came to me right after I was shot. She's not just a random spirit. There's something she's trying to tell me. Morales sighed and rubbed his eyes, but his expression softened slightly. I don't know, Lima. I just don't know. I've never seen you like this. Maybe you're right, but how are we supposed to figure this out? What if? Before he could finish, the lights in the room flickered again. This time, they didn't just blink, they shuddered, as if something had shaken the very foundation of the building. The temperature dropped even further, and Raphael's breath misted in front of him. It was happening again. The cold. The dread. The warning. And then, as if on cue, the door to the room slammed open. The nurse who had left just moments ago was back, her face even more pale than before. She was breathing heavily, looking over her shoulder as if expecting something, or someone, to follow her. Doctor. Get the doctor, she shouted, her voice full of panic. Why? What happened? Morales asked, rising to his feet. The nurse looked at Raphael, her eyes wide with fear. There's something in the hallway. I don't know how to explain it, but I think it's connected to you. You need to be ready. Raphael's heart skipped a beat. He could feel it now. The presence in the building. It was like an invisible force pressing in on them, suffocating them. The walls felt like they were closing in. And for the first time, he realized what the girl's warning truly meant. This wasn't just about him. The girl hadn't just been telling him to fight for his life. She had been preparing him for something far worse. Something coming for them all. Raphael, Morales said, his voice low and serious, I think we need to get out of here. This isn't right. Something's happening, and it's not just in your head. This hospital, something's wrong. Raphael didn't need any more convincing. He could feel it now too, this wasn't just his fight anymore. The girl had been right. She had shown him what he needed to survive, but what was coming next was beyond anything he could have imagined. Suddenly, the lights flickered once again, and for the briefest of moments, everything went dark. When they came back on, the room was different. The walls looked warped, as if they had aged a century in the span of a single heartbeat. The air was thick, oppressive. There was a presence in the room. And Raphael wasn't sure if it was real or if he was still slipping in and out of consciousness. But he couldn't afford to waste any more time. Whatever was happening, whatever was coming, it was too late to escape. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach. I need to see the doctor, Raphael said firmly. I don't think we have much time. As he attempted to sit up, a sudden burst of light, a flash so bright that it nearly blinded him, flared from the hallway. It was so intense that the walls seemed to shake with the force of it. The air became thick with the smell of burning metal and ozone. "Stay down, Raphael," Morales shouted, rushing toward him, but it was too late. The girl's voice echoed in his mind again. "Hurry. You're running out of time." Raphael's heart raced as the intensity of the moment crushed down on him. The hallway outside the room was blinding with light, the harsh brightness flickering in waves like something was trying to break through the fabric of reality itself. Morales had stepped back, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon, his face a mask of confusion and fear. Raphael, however, couldn't look away from the source of the light. There was something calling to him from beyond the threshold, something familiar, yet terrifying. He felt it in his bones, the urge to move toward it, to answer it. "Morales," Raphael whispered, his voice strained. "We need to go." The nurse stood frozen, her face ashen, her eyes wide with terror. We need to leave now," she said, her voice trembling. But before she could take a step, the door slammed shut, the sound deafening, as though an invisible force had just sealed them inside. Raphael's pulse pounded in his ears. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy. The weight in his chest was suffocating, as if something was slowly drawing the life out of him. "Lima!" Morales shouted, grabbing him by the shoulders and shaking him. "Snap out of it. What the hell is going on here? What's happening to us?" The light outside the door flared again, and then, it went completely dark. The temperature plummeted, and for the briefest of moments, Raphael thought he could hear whispers, soft, distant voices, overlapping, disjointed. He could make out a few words, a few phrases, but they didn't make any sense. Then, from the abyss of darkness, he heard a familiar voice. It was the girl. "You have to fight, Raphael. The truth is closer than you think." The words were clear now, and they sent a chill down his spine. The truth. His head throbbed as if the weight of 100 forgotten memories was crashing down on him. Slowly, he felt the presence of the girl again, her energy swirling around him, as though she was guiding him through the fog. Raphael closed his eyes, trying to concentrate, to block out the panic that threatened to overwhelm him. He needed to understand. The girl was offering him something, answers. And now, in this moment, it felt like he was on the edge of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. The whispers grew louder. He could hear them now, sharp and distinct. It wasn't a random attack. Raphael's breath hitched. That's when he realized it. The shooting wasn't just a part of some random drug bust or criminal operation. It wasn't just about him being in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was a purpose behind it. The girl had been trying to tell him that all along. The sudden realization struck like lightning. The attack, the girl, everything, it was connected to something bigger. Something that Raphael had been too blind to see. He gasped. The hospital. It's all connected. Morales, who had been standing by the door, looked at him as though he'd lost his mind. What? What are you talking about? It wasn't just me, Morales. Raphael's voice was a hoarse whisper, but there was urgency in his tone now. The hospital. It's the key. The room felt suddenly colder again, and Raphael knew it wasn't just the temperature. There was a force around them, an invisible presence pressing in from every corner. He could feel it, he could taste it. It was as though the walls themselves were alive. We need to get out of here, Raphael, Morales insisted, his voice tight with fear. This place, it's wrong. But Raphael was already moving. His legs were shaky, but the adrenaline in his system was enough to push through the pain. He grabbed Morales by the arm, pulling him toward the door. We can't leave. Not yet. His voice was desperate, tinged with a sense of urgency he couldn't explain. There's something here, something hidden. We have to find it. As they reached the door, it swung open on its own. But what they saw outside wasn't what they expected. The hallway beyond was no longer the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor of the hospital. Instead, it was dark, too dark, as if the building itself had shifted. The walls were cracked, the air thick with dust and a strange, metallic scent. It looked like something from a nightmare. Raphael's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the vision in front of him. This place, the hospital, wasn't just a building. It was a vessel, a cage. And the truth, whatever it was waiting for them within its decaying walls. "Where are we?" Morales asked, his voice trembling. "This isn't the hospital." Raphael's eyes narrowed. The girl's warning echoed in his mind once more. "The truth is closer than you think." And just as he was about to step forward, he saw it, etched into the cracked wall ahead of them, barely visible in the dim light. A symbol. A symbol he recognized. It was the same mark that had been on the envelope he'd received a few days before the operation. The one with the mysterious, cryptic note. The truth was waiting, but it wasn't in the form Raphael had imagined. It wasn't just about him, or the shooting, or even the girl. This went deeper. The hospital, the attack, the symbols, everything had been part of a larger plan. And it was unfolding right before his eyes. But Raphael knew one thing for certain now. He wasn't just a bystander. He was meant to be here. "Morales," Raphael said, his voice low but firm. "We're not leaving. Not until we figure this out." The detective stared at him, a mixture of confusion and fear in his eyes. But then, slowly, he nodded. He knew better than to argue. They were in this together now. With the flicker of the lights overhead, the two men stepped into the unknown, the symbol marking the beginning of a journey into a dark truth neither of them could escape. Raphael felt a strange sense of clarity, even as the walls around him seemed to pulse and shift. The dark hallway stretched before them, each step further taking them into the unknown. It was as though the hospital was no longer just a building, it was a labyrinth, and they were trapped in its heart, searching for something that could very well destroy them. The flickering lights cast long, distorted shadows, and the deeper they ventured into the corridor, the more oppressive the air felt. The temperature had dropped even further, and Raphael's breath came in short, sharp bursts, each one visible in the frigid space. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears, louder than the clicking of his boots against the floor. Morales was beside him, his expression tight, nervous. The older detective had always been calm under pressure, but tonight was different. This wasn't a case, this wasn't a situation they could handle with standard procedure. This was something else. "What the hell is this place?" Morales whispered, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly would disturb the very air around them. Raphael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let his gaze travel across the cracked walls, the disorienting shadows, and the faint, distant hum that seemed to vibrate from deep within the building. His hand brushed against the wall, feeling the cracks beneath his fingers. There was something ancient about this place, something that felt older than the hospital itself. He glanced back toward the symbol. It had to mean something. Why was it there? "The symbol," Raphael muttered under his breath. "Yeah," Morales said, glancing back at the jagged marking etched into the wall. "I've seen it before, too. On that envelope you got. You're telling me it's connected to this?" Raphael nodded slowly, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The envelope, the cryptic note, the attack, it had all led them here. The girl, her warnings, her promises, they had been pointing them in this direction. This wasn't just an accident. This was planned. They reached the end of the hallway. The door in front of them was made of heavy, iron-wrought metal, unlike any hospital door they had ever encountered. It was old, rusted at the edges, as if it had been untouched for decades. But something was pulling them forward, something deep inside Raphael telling him that the truth lay beyond that door. He reached for the handle, his hand shaking. It felt cold, too cold, almost as if the door itself was alive, pulsating with an energy he couldn't explain. "Wait, Raphael," Morales said, his voice strained. "Are you sure about this? We have no idea what's on the other side." Raphael hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle for a moment. He knew they were in over their heads, that they could be walking straight into a trap. But deep down, he felt the truth was right there. And if he didn't go through that door now, he might never get another chance. "We have to go in," Raphael said, his voice firm. With a sharp turn, the door creaked open. The sound was haunting, like a scream that had been silenced long ago. What lay beyond wasn't another sterile hospital room. It was a vast, underground chamber. The room was enormous, dimly lit by a single flickering light in the center of the ceiling. The walls were lined with shelves, many of them empty, others cluttered with strange, old books, papers, and equipment. In the farthest corner, Raphael saw a large metallic object covered with a dirty, ragged sheet. But what immediately caught his attention was the center of the room. At the heart of the chamber stood a circular table, and standing around it were several figures in dark, hooded robes. Raphael could barely make out their features, but the atmosphere in the room was thick with a sense of something ancient, something sinister. One of the figures, the tallest among them, slowly turned to face them as they entered, his movements deliberate and slow. A deep, gravelly voice filled the air, sending a chill down Raphael's spine. "You should not have come." Raphael's breath caught in his throat. The girl. The one who had been with him all this time. She had led them here, and now the time had come. She had given him the strength to survive. But for what? The robed figure took a step forward. "You are too late. The rituals are already in motion." "Rituals?" Raphael echoed, his voice hoarse. "What is this? Who are you?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to the far corner of the room. "Look. The truth you seek is right in front of you." Raphael's gaze followed the gesture, and his eyes widened as he saw what the figure was pointing at. The sheet covering the metallic object was pulled back, revealing a large vessel, a machine, an altar, something that looked like it belonged in a forgotten era. There were wires, tubes, and strange markings all over it. The girl. She was lying on the table, her body motionless. But this wasn't the same girl. Her face was pale, lifeless. She looked almost frozen, like a statue. The room seemed to hum around her, as though something was pulling at the very fabric of reality. "What is this?" Raphael whispered. The figure stepped forward, lifting his hood to reveal a face Raphael knew all too well. It was a face he had seen only once, on a photograph, years ago. It was Dr. Fernandez. The same doctor who had been overseeing his recovery, the one who had dismissed everything he had seen as hallucinations. Dr. Fernandez spoke, his voice cold and distant. "You've been part of this plan all along, Raphael. You just didn't know it." Raphael staggered backward, the weight of the realization crashing down on him. "What? What are you talking about?" Dr. Fernandez's lips curled into a smile, but it was a smile devoid of warmth. This hospital was never just a hospital. It was a vessel, a place where we gathered the most important pieces for the ritual. The girl you saw, she wasn't a ghost, nor a hallucination. She was a catalyst, an experiment. And you, Raphael, are the final piece. Raphael felt his stomach twist. "What do you mean, the final piece?" Dr. Fernandez stepped closer, his eyes gleaming. "You. Your survival, your blood. It was all part of the plan. Now, the ritual is complete." Everything clicked into place, the girl's appearance, the cryptic messages, the symbol. Raphael had been part of something far larger than he realized. He wasn't just a cop caught in a shooting. He was a key in a ritual that would change everything. And as the walls around him seemed to close in, as Dr. Fernandez's words echoed in his mind, Raphael realized with horror that he hadn't just been a victim in all of this. He was the sacrifice. Before he could react, the humming grew louder, the air growing thick, pressing in on him. The girl's voice, now clear, whispered in his mind again. "You must stop it." If you liked this story and want more content like this, leave a like, share it with someone you know will be moved by it, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Together, we will explore inspiring stories and moments that touch the heart. Until the next video.